Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She has an older brother, and a loving mother. Although her father was absent from their lives, but Lisa and her mother shared an exceptionally close bond, rarely arguing. Those who knew them admired the harmony in their relationship. During her teenage years, Lisa developed a passion for dancing. She also became interested in IT, which was a relatively new field at the time. Notably, she was an early user of email, using it before many of her friends knew of its existence. This interest significantly influenced her future career path. Following college, Lisa got a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother later used her savings to purchase a small studio apartment for Lisa in a prestigious neighborhood, which offered a stunning city view. Living alone, Lisa advanced in her career, prioritized family time, and continued dancing, attending weekly practice sessions with her best friend. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, who was 36 at the time, hosted an evening gathering with her mother and some family friends. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes and then headed home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, Lisa's mother thought she was simply busy, especially since she had dance practice scheduled for that day. However, as the day progressed without any communication from Lisa, her mother began to worry. The following day, Lisa's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. She continued attempting to reach Lisa, but her calls went unanswered. On Monday, the fourth day since they last spoke, Lisa's colleagues contacted her mother to express their concern that Lisa had not shown up for work and was not responding to their calls. This was highly unusual, as Lisa was known for her reliability and always notified her workplace if she needed to take a day off. Lisa's mother grew increasingly concerned, so she decided to visit apartment complex to check on her. When she arrived, she witnessed a disturbing scene. The building was surrounded by police tape and there were a lot of police officers. She asked the police what was going on, and they told her that earlier that day, some residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The building manager checked and found an unlocked door, then went inside and found a body on the floor, and they called the police. The police then were promptly called to the scene. Police officers quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed clear signs of trauma and decomposition, indicating she had been murdered several days prior. The presence of blood stains on the floor and bed, along with her partially undressed state and underwear found next to her body, suggested she had been being attacked and sexually abused. The room was in disarray, but further investigation revealed that this was typical of Lisa's living habits. The TV was on, and the air conditioner was set to 78 degrees. No signs of robbery were present, with valuables and jewelry left untouched. However, Lisa's keys and a gym bag were missing. A peculiar detail was the removal of some of Lisa's hair by the attacker, hinting at strong personal motives. The numerous injuries on her body further supported this theory. The detectives suspected that the killer might have had a prior relationship with Lisa and cherish a deep-seated hatred for her, given the lack of forced entry and the secure nature of the fenced apartment complex. Additionally, the apartment complex was secured with a fence, and access required either a key or to be let in by a resident. The police began interviewing residents in the apartment building, searching for someone who might have seen the attacker. They quickly found a lead when one of Lisa's neighbors reported that 2 days earlier, upon returning from vacation, he noticed damage to the metal frame of his front door and a faint blood stain. Although he had informed the manager, but they decided not to report it to the police, as it appeared his apartment had not been broken into. Detectives believed the same person who killed Lisa was responsible for the damage to the neighbor's door. However, the motives behind these actions were unclear. One theory was that the killer tried to break into the neighbor's apartment, was caught by Lisa, and subsequently murdered her. Another theory suggested the attempted break-in might have occurred after Lisa's murder, which seemed unusual. Detectives speak with the housekeeper who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. 2 days before Lisa's body was found, the housekeeper attempted to enter the apartment, but found the door blocked from the inside. Through a crack in the door, she saw a partially undressed woman on the floor and heard a man's voice. Believing she was interrupting a private moment, she left immediately. Police suspected that Lisa was already dead at this time and the man's voice belonged to her killer, who was still inside the apartment. The housekeeper mentioned a suspicious detail, a black bag with a zipper near the body. However, she was uncertain since she only caught a glimpse. On the inside of Lisa's apartment door, an envelope with cash was taped, untouched. This money was intended for the housekeeper, a frequent habit of Lisa. The fact that the envelope was still there suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother departed, sometime between midnight and the early hours of the morning, which would have been when Lisa normally left the payment. Neighbors from the floor below corroborated these things. They reported hearing thuds and someone descending the stairs, although they didn't see the individual. As detectives searched Lisa's apartment, they discovered an unusual detail: the toilet seat was up, uncommon for a woman living alone. Forensic experts found a partial fingerprint that didn't match Lisa's. The police collected fingerprints from Lisa's acquaintances and relatives who may have visited her apartment, but none matched. This led detectives to believe that the fingerprint might belong to the killer. The medical experts completed their report, revealing new information about Lisa's case. Her body had over 20 stab wounds, but due to decomposition, it was unclear if she had been sexually assaulted. However, defensive wounds on her body suggested that Lisa had attempted to fight off her attacker. Furthermore, skin particles were found under her nails, which were likely from the killer, and were sent to the lab for analysis. In the meantime, forensic experts analyzed evidence from the apartment and discovered a crucial clue: a pillowcase with multiple blood stains. Upon closer examination, it was determined that not all of the blood on the pillowcase belonged to Lisa, as some of the stains were from a different source. As a result, the pillowcase was sent to the lab for further testing. Investigators suggested that the killer may have unintentionally hurt himself while stabbing Lisa, which can happen when using a knife. Supporting this hypothesis was the discovery of 2 bandages from a first aid kit inside the toilet. The killer might have used these to stop his bleeding and potentially left fingerprints on the toilet seat when disposing of the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase came from an unknown male not listed in the FBI database. This man's DNA also matched skin particles under Lisa's nails and a blood stain on her pillowcase. Despite no matches in the DNA database, detectives obtained the killer's DNA profile. They then compared it to DNA samples from suspects in their system who had committed crimes in Lisa's area and closely examined her acquaintances. Lisa's mother shared information about Lisa's relationship with a man named Albert Ketto, stating they had plans for a date the day following the murder. However, these plans were canceled by Albert a few days beforehand. When detectives questioned Ketto, they noticed a large cut on his hand, which made them suspect him as the killer. And he might have injured themselves while stabbing Lisa. Despite this, Albert denied any involvement in the murder. The detectives took his fingerprints and DNA samples for comparison, but surprisingly, they did not match the blood on the pillowcase or the skin particles found under Lisa's nails. Investigators continued their search for other suspects by reviewing the messages on Lisa's answering machine from the days leading up to the murder. After making a list of 40 people texting Lisa, they found one message particularly suspicious. Just hours before the murder, while Lisa still had guests at her home, a man called her, but she didn't pick up, he leaving a strange message: "You know how it goes, Tita. Hey Lisa, Are you home? When police played this message for one of Lisa's friends, the friend immediately identified the voice as Albert Robinson, a work colleague of Lisa's. Albert had made his feelings for Lisa known, but she had rejected his advances. Despite this, they remained friendly at work and, with Lisa considering him a friend. During the memorial service for Lisa, something else happened. Albert attended the service and delivered a speech that left everyone perplexed. He asserted that he and Lisa were intensely in love and had plans to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother disputed Albert's things, stating that they were entirely false. According to them, Lisa had mentioned that Albert had expressed interest in her, but she did not reciprocate his feelings. Lisa's mother also emphasized that Lisa would have confided in her about such significant plans. Albert was questioned by the police and he denied being involved in Lisa's murder. He claimed to love her and said he would never hurt her. However, he refused to give the police his DNA sample and fingerprints, which raised suspicions. As a result, detectives continued to investigate him and look for new evidence. It is possible that Lisa's failure to reciprocate Albert's feelings made him hate her and kill her in revenge. The violent nature of the murder suggested that it was personal, and the fact that the killer cut off some of Lisa's hair and took it with him could be related to Albert's fixation on her. Detectives got a search warrant for Albert's house and found it filled with dozens of Lisa's photos, further evidence of his obsession. Despite this, he continued to deny any involvement in the murder. He voluntarily provided his fingerprints and DNA, which were sent to the lab for analysis. However, the lab results showed no match with the DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, he was cleared as a suspect, and the investigation continued. Years went by with no new leads, and the case remained unsolved. Investigators regularly checked DNA and fingerprint databases, hoping the killer would be caught for another crime, but there were no matches. Police were initially baffled that the perpetrator of such a heinous crime did not appear in any databases, so they doubted it was his first serious offense. Despite ongoing searches over the years, the police couldn't find any matches. Lisa's mother made multiple television appearances, pleading for anyone with information to come forward, yet detectives remained without new leads. In 2010, detectives discovered the FBI had begun utilizing a new DNA technology to identify suspects by comparing their DNA samples with those in the database to find relatives. This method, unlike genetic genealogy which emerged later, was only effective for locating close relatives, such as a father or brother. With no other leads, police requested a comparison in 2011 and waited. On September 2nd, lead detective Ive received a call from the FBI. They said that when the experts retested the DNA sample, they got a perfect match. The DNA from blood and skin particles under her nails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, who had recently been added to the FBI database. Anthony had a lengthy criminal record that went back decades, but previously, his crimes didn't qualify for his DNA to be included in the FBI database. However, due to updates in legislation, it became mandatory for individuals convicted of crimes in California to provide DNA samples, irrespective of how minor the offense was. Anthony's DNA sample was added to the database following his arrest for a minor shoplifting offense. In addition to his DNA, his fingerprints were also entered into the database, and they were found to match a fingerprint discovered on Lisa's toilet seat. Specialists were even able to pinpoint which specific finger left the print with relative ease. Before arresting Anthony, detectives searched for more evidence linking him to the crime. They stumbled upon a new clue. 13 years prior, police had reviewed messages left on Lisa's answering machine, but only those received before her murder. Now, after all these years, detectives found that Anthony had left a message for Lisa just a day after her death. The message itself was unremarkable and didn't raise suspicions. However, if the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they won't just find out his dense criminal history but also another important piece of information. Upon reviewing Lisa's belongings, detectives discovered Anthony's phone number in her address book, which confirmed that Lisa and Anthony knew each other. Further investigation, including conversations with Lisa's friends, revealed that Lisa and Anthony had dated briefly in high school. With this new information, detectives felt they had sufficient grounds to question Anthony. However, since he didn't have a fixed address at the time, they decided to approach him cautiously to prevent him from fleeing. When they arrested him, they initially told him that he was being investigated in connection with a series of robberies in San Francisco. Anthony surrendered without resistance. During the interrogation, detectives initially asked Anthony about the robberies. They then inquired about his relationship with Lisa. Initially, Anthony denied knowing Lisa, but when shown her photo, he acknowledged that they had known each other in high school. He also claimed that he hadn't seen her since the late 1980s. Detectives spent several hours questioning Anthony about his relationship with Lisa and whether he had seen her recently. When investigators confronted Anthony about the DNA evidence found in Lisa's apartment from 1998, his response was unexpected. He burst into tears and requested a pen and paper, seemingly prepared to confess. However, instead of writing a confession, he began hitting himself with the pen. Authorities had to restrain him as he continued crying and shouting, claiming he was being framed for a crime he didn't commit. Following this, Anthony was charged with Lisa's murder, and her family was informed that her killer had finally been caught. The trial was delayed by 4 years. Then, when it began, Anthony appeared confident, even smirking. However, later he began displaying religious symbols, such as carrying a Bible and wearing a cross. Detectives believed this was a tactic to sway the jury. Anthony's lawyer argued that he was physically incapable of committing the crime. A medical condition, diagnosed 5 years prior, had weakened his muscles, making it extremely difficult to perform repetitive movements. The lawyer argued that given this condition, Anthony could not have inflicted the more than 20 stab wounds found on Lisa. According to the medical report that year, Anthony's health condition was recovered well at the time of the murder. The prosecution had strong evidence that placed Anthony at the scene case, including his skin under Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. However, regardless of the evidence against him, Anthony consistently denied having seen Lisa since the late 80s. The prosecution presented a theory that Anthony had gone to Lisa's home, attempted to initiate intimate contact with she, and when she rejected, he brutally murdered her. After the crime, he cut off a piece of her hair and took it with him as he fled. Anthony Hughes was ultimately given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years. In 2031, when he will be 72 years old. Anthony is currently serving his sentence in prison. However, he still maintains his innocence and says he was wrongfully convicted. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalie Connolly. Natalie Connolly is a beautiful and charming woman who has a stunning appearance identical to her twin sister. Her sister is equally beautiful, and they share a close bond not only because of their similar appearance but also because of their deep connection. Natalie has a special ability to bring joy to those around her. She can easily make people laugh and chat with anyone she meets. Despite facing the challenges of being a single mother, Natalie always strives to ensure that her daughter, Madison, does not lack anything. Her care and love for Madison are evident in her constant presence and attention. In a crowded bar, Natalie meets John, a charming and elegant man. They are attracted to each other from the beginning, and their relationship gradually blossoms. John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. They exchange contact information and begin to delve deeper into their relationship. As Natalie spends more time with John, she feels an irresistible attraction to him. This was evident from the moment they first met, even though she had no idea of his profession or wealth at the time. As they grow closer, John reveals that he is a millionaire. His wealth is displayed through lavish gifts and fancy dinners at top restaurants. Natalie is fascinated by John's gentlemanly and elegant style, as well as his lavish mansion. However, behind John's charming exterior, there is much more mystery. His life is far more complicated than he lets on. While engaged to a pregnant partner and expecting a second child, John hides the existence of 3 other children. His relationship with Natalie is actually an affair, which continues even as John deals with the breakup of his previous relationship. Eventually, John chooses to turn his attention to Natalie. Their romance seems like a fairy tale from the start. John and Madison become close quickly, and Natalie soon wins the hearts of John's children. John treats Natalie to lavish and romantic experiences, from spa trips to hiring a chauffeur. It seems like he is making all her dreams come true. However, when Natalie moves in with John in Kinver, Stafford, England, the truth slowly emerges. Their relationship, initially fueled by passion, reveals its true nature once they live under the same roof. As they spend every waking moment together, they begin to understand each other better. However, John's interests start to annoy her. He enjoys intimate interactions and often leaves bruises and scratches. Romantic gestures and lavish dinners lose their appeal as Natalie realizes that she has to pay a high price for all of them. Natalie once thought her relationship with John was a fairy tale, but now she realizes the harsh truth behind it. Fearing abandonment, she still accepts John's demands during their intense sexual encounters. She recalls how John abandoned his pregnant ex-fiancée and fears the same thing will happen to her. Despite this, Natalie still feels fulfilled in the relationship and does not want to leave because she fears returning to her old monotonous life. She seeks comfort and guidance from her sister and mother, sharing the bruises and scratches John leaves during their intense sexual encounters. She admits that John enjoys causing her pain. Natalie faces a difficult situation as her relationship with John brings her happiness but also has negative aspects. She is caught in a dilemma of wanting to maintain her luxurious lifestyle with John while being dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of the relationship. The tension between them increases as they both seek out other relationships. As John continues to chat with other women, Natalie also begins texting other men without John's knowledge. When John discovers these exchanges, he becomes very angry. Although John makes no secret of his interactions with other women, he strongly objects to Natalie interacting with other men, highlighting the unfairness of their relationship. Despite John's attempts to hide his insecurities, he invites Natalie out for a casual evening on December 18, 2016, which includes drinks, football, and dinner. John forces Natalie to drink heavily and even offers her cocaine, albeit in smaller amounts than he consumes. This was not the first time he had created such a situation, suggesting a pattern of behavior intended to make Natalie more comfortable before committing bad acts on her when they were home alone. This raises the question of whether Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions was an attempt to dull the pain she knew she would endure behind closed doors with him. John wanted to be in complete control of the situation, ensuring he could carry out his intentions towards Natalie without being hindered. Therefore, he carefully controlled his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a mild state of intoxication that did not affect his performance during their sexual encounters. After what seemed like a pleasant day out, ending with a satisfying meal at one of their favorite places, John arranged for a driver to take them home. However, beneath the normal appearance, John's evil intentions were hidden. That day, Natalie was in a drunken state, which only worsened as dinner failed to sober her up or absorb the alcohol. She was disoriented, stumbling out of the car as they arrived home, accidentally leaving her phone behind. Instead of letting Natalie recover from her drunkenness, John had other intentions. He returned to retrieve Natalie's phone, but it is unclear whether he had seen her messages. Natalie became the victim of John's cruel actions as he attempted to inflict maximum harm on her. He attacked her in various ways, including punching, kicking, stomping, and the disgusting act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, John used a bottle of carpet cleaner, using its nozzle as a weapon. After the attack, he left Natalie naked and bloody at the bottom of the stairs, her dress pulled up around her waist, leaving her to suffer from her injuries. Natalie lay motionless in a pool of blood when John left the bed. A few hours later, when he awoke, he discovered that Natalie had died from the severe injuries she had sustained, totaling 40. John's subsequent actions, including his nonchalant call to emergency services, revealed his twisted mentality. He showed no emotion or remorse when he informed the paramedics of his futile attempts at CPR and referred to Natalie's unresponsive state with indifference. As the paramedics loaded Natalie's body into the ambulance, John remained silent and emotionless, observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was pronounced dead, John was arrested. To justify his cruel actions, John made the excuse that the rough sex had gone too far and claimed his innocence. He alleged that Natalie had consented to the rough actions, claiming that she had initiated them and that she had been the one who desired all these brutal actions. According to John, Natalie allegedly requested rough sex, including being injured, beaten, and even having a bottle of carpet cleaner inserted into her. John claimed that, despite bleeding and in pain, Natalie allegedly reassured him that she was safe and wanted to continue. However, John's account is not credible. He attempted to deflect blame by saying that Natalie had agreed to engage in rough sex and that they had engaged in similar acts many times without issue. When asked about leaving Natalie partially clothed at the bottom of the stairs, John offered a weak excuse, claiming it was a regular occurrence and that he had never provided a blanket because the house was always warm. Throughout the proceedings, John showed no remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on Natalie. His attempts to shift the blame left onlookers frustrated. Despite being convicted of manslaughter, John received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, but only served 22 months before being released. Natalie Connolly's case sparked widespread criticism and controversy, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. The movement aims to promote discussion about sexual assault and calls for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, the defense minimizes and legitimizes violence in intimate relationships, perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and devalues the experiences of survivors. However, in interviews, Fiona has been surprised that some people, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, have accepted it. The reason for this acceptance is that they believe the incident was isolated, not a systemic problem. However, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, with survivors being held responsible for the risks that may have resulted from their behavior. Such attitudes highlight the need for continued advocacy and education to challenge harmful beliefs and support survivors of sexual violence. The Domestic Violence Bill was passed by Parliament on July 6, 2020, and following royal assent on April 29, 2021, it became law and is known as the Domestic Violence Act 2021. This marks a significant step forward in combating domestic violence and preventing perpetrators from using harmful excuses to justify their actions. Natalie's loss has left a deep void in the lives of her family and friends. They are still grappling with the pain of her loss. However, their unwavering love and support for Natalie is a testament to her strong and resilient spirit. The community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and support survivors on their journeys to healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion are an inspiration and hope to those struggling. Although Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Her story will hopefully inspire us to come together to fight domestic violence and support those in need. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brandon Duran. Brandon Duran was born in 1980 in San Diego, California, to a father who was a passionate motorcyclist and a former member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, considered a criminal organization by the FBI. When Brandon was around 10 years old, his parents divorced, but they maintained a good relationship and shared responsibilities in raising their son. Brandon inherited his father's love for motorcycles and at 25, built his own bike from scratch, which became a treasured possession. He socialized with other bikers but never joined a motorcycle club. However, his life took a dramatic turn when his father unexpectedly passed away in April 2005, plunging Brandon into depression. To overcome his grief, Brandon decided to make a change in his life and embarked on a road trip to Las Vegas on his motorcycle. During his year-long stay in Vegas, he met Amber Andrews, 24, and they fell deeply in love. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage just 2 months later, and Amber became pregnant soon after. In December 2006, Amber gave birth to their son, Brando. The arrival of his son marked a significant transformation in Brandon's life. He became a devoted father and husband, prioritizing his family over his personal interests and securing a high-paying job. Amber failed to prioritize her new role as a mother, instead continuing to frequent biker gatherings and parties. This led to a rapid deterioration in the young family's relationships, with fights becoming increasingly common. The inevitable outcome was divorce, filed just 4 years after their wedding. Brandon was granted full custody of their child due to his ability to provide for himself and his son, unlike Amber. After the divorce was finalized in 2010, Amber returned to her hometown in Oklahoma, while Brandon went back to San Diego with their son. There, he was reunited with his family, who helped him raise his child. As time passed, Brandon's emotional wounds from the failed marriage began to heal, and he became optimistic about the future. However, in the summer of 2012, Amber unexpectedly showed up at his doorstep, asking for a second chance at their relationship. Brandon's long-suppressed feelings resurfaced, and he chose to believe in Amber's sincerity, agreeing to give their relationship another try. With their son Brando set to start kindergarten in September, Amber requested that the three of them visit her parents in Oklahoma, who were eager to see their grandson. Brandon consented, and they began preparing for the trip, planning to stay in Oklahoma for about a week. A few days before Brandon, Amber and their son were due to return to San Diego, Van Emblem reached out to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. He reported that his friend and employer, 30-year-old Justin Hammer from Garvin County, had asked for his help in disposing of a body, claiming it was that of Brandon Duran. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation alerted the local sheriff, who immediately visited Hammer's ranch with his assistant. They also contacted Brandon's relatives in San Diego, who informed them that they had been unable to reach Brandon for several days. Once this information was confirmed, the authorities decided not to share the details of the case with Brandon's family. Justin Hammer unexpectedly confessed to killing Brandon Duran when questioned by detectives. However, he claimed it was self-defense, saying that Brandon, a member of a dangerous motorcycle gang, had come to his house on August 7th, kicked in the door, and threatened him. According to Hammer, Brandon was angry about his relationship with Amber and threatened to harm him and his family if he didn't stay away from her. Hammer said he grabbed a nearby shotgun and fired it, killing Brandon. Fearing retaliation from the motorcycle club, Hammer did not call the police and instead hid the evidence. He dismembered Brandon's body in the bathroom using a saw, then put the remains in 5-gallon buckets filled with cement. Hammer needed help loading the heavy buckets into his pickup truck, so he asked his friend Van for assistance. After they loaded the buckets, Van left and reported Hammer to the police. Hammer's ranch had a small pond where he disposed of the buckets after handling the body. He then cleaned the house and later burned the cleaning supplies, gloves, and rags. According to Hammer, he gave Brandon's motorcycle to a relative who unknowingly received the bike and dismantled it for spare parts. The police investigation led to the discovery of 5 buckets at the bottom of the pond. When the officers informed Amber about Brandon's death, she was shocked. She revealed that although she and Brandon were divorced, they had planned to reunite. Amber also confessed to having fought with Brandon the day before his death, following his discovery of her affair with Justin Hammer. This new information prompted the investigators to focus on Amber. She claimed that Brandon left on his motorcycle after their argument, but his family said it was broken. The question arose, if the motorcycle wasn't severely damaged, why would Brandon take it to Oklahoma for repairs instead of fixing it locally? Amber's story about her whereabouts on the day of Brandon's death raised suspicions. She claimed to have a doctor's appointment, but the police couldn't find any records of her visiting a medical facility that day. This meant she had no alibi for the time of Brandon's death. Detectives later found out that Amber had asked a friend to watch her son that day. When the friend arrived at 3 p.m., Amber and Brandon left the house together in Brandon's pickup truck, which had a motorcycle in the back. Amber left her phone behind and didn't return for 8 hours. When she finally came back, Brandon and the motorcycle were no longer with the truck. On Amber's phone, investigators discovered a message from Justin Hammer sent just before she and Brandon left the house, which read, "The ink is ready." The police thought this was a code, indicating that everything was in place to deal with Brandon. After talking to Amber's close friends, detectives learned that she had no interest in getting back together with her ex-husband and often spoke negatively about him. She was bitter about Brandon having full custody of their son and resented him. New evidence emerged that contradicted Amber's account. Forensic analysis confirmed that Amber had written the suspicious note found in Hammer's safe, which listed items necessary for disposing of a body. Furthermore, footage from the local hardware store's CCTV cameras revealed that the crime was premeditated. The footage showed Hammer purchasing buckets and other items from Amber's list the day before Brandon's murder. Despite this, Hammer claimed during his trial that he had acted alone in self-defense, attempting to shield Amber from suspicion. He asserted that the items on the list were actually for home repairs, not for getting rid of the body. Justin Hammer claimed to have used 2 weapons during the crime, holding a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other. However, investigators found this statement suspicious and unlikely. The trial, expected to last several weeks, surprisingly ended with the jury deliberating for only an hour and a half. They returned with a recommended sentence of life in prison without parole. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Austin expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating it was a fitting punishment and brought justice to Brandon Duran's family. She believed the sentence was appropriate. Cindy Ware, Brandon's mother, was overjoyed with the jury's decision and acknowledged that it must have been a difficult one to make. She had been hoping for this outcome for 2 years. In October 2014, Justin Hammer was formally sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 months later, his wife Amber was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of her ex-husband, desecrating his remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Despite pleading not guilty, Amber was denied bail. Amber sat in the courtroom, handcuffed and dressed in a light purple inmate suit, expressing frustration that it had taken 32 months to be reunited with her son. She had only just been allowed to return home to him a month prior, and she was desperate to stay with him until the trial. However, District Judge Jeff Virgin of Norman, Oklahoma, denied her request for bail, agreeing with the prosecution's argument that the seriousness of the allegations against her made her a flight risk. The trial, which began in the spring of 2017, was a long time coming. Over 2 years had passed since Amber was charged. She maintained her innocence, with her lawyers claiming she was not present at the crime scene. Conversely, prosecutors Christy Miller and Jennifer Austin argued that Andrews had the strongest motive to kill Brandon Duran. Miller testified that Amber Andrews was the only person with a motive to want him gone, as she needed him to disappear in order to regain custody of their son. According to Miller, Amber had a strong reason to want him out of the way, and Hammer had a place where the crime could be committed. They thought they had come up with the perfect plan. The prosecutor explained that Amber's motive was to get rid of Duran so she could regain custody of their young son. He pointed out that Amber had been absent from home for 8 hours on the day of Brandon's death, and there was no evidence to support her alibi. The prosecutor suggested that Amber had helped Hammer get rid of the body and clean up the house, neglecting her parental responsibilities in the process. However, the defense attorney, Jay Mendros, argued that the prosecutor's office had not provided any evidence linking Amber to the crime. He told the jurors that when there is no evidence, the prosecution resorts to attacking Amber's character. According to Mendros, the state's case was based on a theory, but there was no concrete evidence to support it. Mendros claimed that Amber was not capable of planning a murder and that Justin, who was afraid of losing her, had committed the crime. Mendros described the situation as a recipe for disaster, with Duran visiting Oklahoma to rekindle his romance with Amber, while Hammer, who had been Amber's boyfriend for a year, feared losing her to Duran. The defense attorney portrayed the case as a tragic love triangle, where Justin Hammer had a strong motive to kill Brandon Duran, as he was torn between his feelings for Amber and the threat Duran posed. The attorney argued that Amber had been emotionally involved with both men and had oscillated between them, making it difficult to pinpoint her true intentions. The prosecution's case relied on twisted and distorted statements that created a sinister impression in an attempt to imprison someone based on speculation and rumors. The attorney emphasized that, in the American justice system, people are not convicted on assumptions. There must be concrete evidence, and in this case, there was none to suggest that Amber was a co-conspirator or a murderer. Justin Hammer had confessed to the murder, taking full responsibility for the crime. However, during the trial, it was Amber Andrews who was found guilty of the crime. The jurors delivered a guilty verdict after hearing closing arguments, recommending a life sentence for the 35-year-old. Amber appeared in court on June 12, 2017, seemingly in a good mood, awaiting sentencing. Brandon's mother, Cindy Ware, took the stand, overcome with emotion, to share how her son's murder had impacted her and her grandson, Brando. Cindy placed a photo of Duran next to the stand and expressed how Amber had shattered all her dreams. She stated that Brandon's only wish was to be with his family, and Amber had brutally taken that away from him. Cindy sorrowfully reflected on the memories they would never create, such as Brandon teaching Brando how to snowboard and the bright smile that would never again light up a room. Before the judge's final decision, defense attorney Jay Mendros addressed the court once more. He maintained that there was still no concrete evidence linking Amber to the murder and requested that the judge dismiss the jury's guilty verdict and restart the case. Mendros argued that the prosecution's case lacked credible evidence and relied heavily on emotional manipulation to sway the jurors. In essence, the state built a case against Amber based on speculation and gut feelings, rather than concrete proof. The prosecution's strategy was to shock and outrage the jurors, rather than present tangible evidence. As a result, Amber was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the first-degree murder of Brandon Duran, plus additional time for desecrating human remains and conspiring to commit a felony. Meanwhile, Justin Hammer is currently serving his sentence at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, while Amber Andrews is incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma. Brandon Duran has been in the care of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services since August 7, 2012, living with a foster family. In January 2013, Brando was finally allowed to return to San Diego to live with his grandmother, Cindy, after a long and difficult court battle. However, this was not the end of the fight. It took Cindy 5 more years to gain full legal custody of Brando. Once the custody battle was over, Cindy and her relatives sat down with Brando to explain the truth about the verdict and what had happened to his mother. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Loeb. On August 19, 2014, at 5 p.m., the Portland Emergency Services received a distress call from a man reporting a woman stabbed in the chest at the Timber Creek Apartments. The victim, who was still alive but struggling to breathe, needed immediate medical attention. The eyewitness requested an ambulance be sent to the scene as soon as possible. When paramedics arrived, they found the victim. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Before passing away, she shared crucial information. The man who made the 911 call explained that he and his wife were walking down the stairs towards the parking lot when they heard a scream. He looked to his right and saw a woman running towards them, crying out, "He stabbed me! He stabbed me!" The victim told them that she didn't know her attacker, but described him as wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as 29-year-old Nicole Loeb, a leasing consultant who had been working at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, Nicole was driving a golf cart to deliver lease renewal letters to residents, along with a balloon and a popcorn package. She marked each apartment on a map as she made the deliveries. The investigation revealed that the attack likely occurred in a specific stairwell at Timber Creek, known as Breezeway. This conclusion was based on Nicole's notations and the map she had marked. It is believed that the attacker was waiting for her under the stairs, as several indicators pointed to this location, including a trail of blood drops and scattered leaflets at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young male wearing a black hoodie and cam pants in the area around the time of the attack. By combining the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to piece together the path the suspect took into and out of Timber Creek. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, which runs through the Timber Creek apartment complex. They found several items during their search and sent them to a laboratory to see if they were relevant to the case. The police contacted Chris Loeb, Nicole's husband, to inform him of the incident. Chris and Nicole had a blended family, including 2 daughters from his previous relationships and a son together. Nicole was a strong and resilient person who had overcome cancer as a teenager. She developed a passion for fitness and bodybuilding and competed in several events. Her dream was to become a coach and help others achieve their fitness goals. The attack on Nicole was not a robbery, and Tinoco did not attempt to remove any of her clothing. This suggests that the motive behind the attack may have been personal. As a result, detectives began to focus their attention on her husband, Chris. Nicole was a beautiful woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, and a devoted friend. She was unafraid to share her faith and opinions with others, and her goal was to make the world a better place. Her legacy lives on, and it's clear that she achieved her goal. She touched the lives of everyone in the room in ways that will have a lasting impact. The police interviewed residents of the Timber Creek Apartments and found 2 witnesses who saw a man in a black hoodie and cam pants matching the suspect's description running across the road during the time of the attack. The witnesses saw the man running towards the houses across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments, not looking around, and with a hood over his head. Using the witnesses' descriptions, detectives created a sketch of the suspect and quickly distributed it throughout the city. A sketch of the suspect was shown on TV. Detectives also worked with informants, gathering several potential leads, including one from a man whose son knew someone named Taylor. According to the man who reported Taylor, he had been threatening people with a knife in recent weeks. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the questioning, investigators found his statements unusual and suspected he might be suffering from a mental illness. When asked about Nicole Laub, he openly admitted to taking her life. However, Taylor's confession was inconsistent, repeating information from the news and inventing unrelated details. As a result, police excluded him from their list of suspects. Another potential lead emerged involving a man named Nick, who had a history of crime. Nick had some physical characteristics similar to the suspect in the sketch, but his past behavior didn't suggest he was capable of a crime like the one committed against Nicole. Despite having a history of run-ins with the law, Nick had never been known to physically harm anyone. When police brought Nick in for questioning, he denied any involvement in the crime and requested a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie didn't match the witness's description because it had a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothes to a lab for further analysis, but experts found no evidence linking them to the crime. The police obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which provided conclusive evidence that he was not at the crime scene when Nicole was attacked. This eliminated Nick as a suspect, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received a call came from Eugene, the second largest city in Oregon. On the night of the 13th, Heather Miller, a 39-year-old woman, was attacked as she was leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. Tinoco, identified as Jamie Tinoco, was publicly named by the police, who released his photo in the hopes that other victims would come forward. Detectives investigating the death of Nicole Laub noticed a resemblance between Tinoco's photo and their suspect sketch. Further investigation revealed that Tinoco lived with his parents in an apartment directly across from the Timber Creek apartment complex where Laub had died. This geographical proximity strengthened the suspicion that Tinoco might be responsible for her death. Detectives questioned Tinoco about his potential involvement in Laub's death, hoping he would confess, just as he had done in a separate case involving Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Laub's death and refused to cooperate. As a result, the police had to gather evidence to link Tinoco to the crime. With his parents' apartment located directly across from the Timber Creek complex, the police obtained a search warrant. During the search, they found a black hoodie and cam pants in Tinoco's room, which they sent to the lab for analysis. The lab report results with no DNA match found. While there's no concrete evidence linking Tinoco to Nicole's death, he's clearly responsible for attacking Heather Miller and showed no remorse, even taking pride in his actions during his trial. In a new interrogation, investigators used Tinoco's ego to their advantage, suggesting that if he confessed to Nicole Laub's murder, he would gain respect from other inmates in prison. The detective implied that owning up to the crime would make him appear more formidable, rather than just a coward who attacked a woman from behind. After a brief silence, Tinoco began to open up about Nicole. He claimed that he didn't intend to kill her, but rather wanted to experience the feeling of stabbing someone. According to Tinoco, his goal was to hurt Nicole, not take her life. He described how he had seen Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a balloon in a small package to an apartment on the second floor of Timber Creek, which is located near his apartment. Nicole was attacked when she went upstairs and then came back down. Tinoco hid behind a golf cart, then ran to the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she descended. He chose Nicole because she seemed like an easy target. When questioned about his intentions, he admitted that he had considered forcing Nicole into a sexual act, just as he had done with Heather Miller. However, he claimed that he didn't follow through with this plan because Nicole screamed loudly after being stabbed, prompting him to flee the scene. During a reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated how he escaped from the scene. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, was shocked to learn that the person responsible for his wife's death was only 17 years old. As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, Laube found it incomprehensible that someone just 4 years older than his daughter could commit such a heinous crime. The trial started in 2015. Tinoco confessed to the crime during the interrogation, but he claimed he was innocent in court. His lawyer argued that there was no DNA evidence linking Tinoco to the crime scene. The lawyer asked for mercy for Tinoco, who was 17 years old and severely mentally ill, and hoped that treatment could help him change his behavior. The defense presented only one witness, a psychologist who evaluated Tinoco and found that he exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia. However, another psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital disagreed, saying that Tinoco had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. The jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after watching a video of his confession and an experiment where he recreated his actions at the time of the crime. Jamie Tinoco provided details during a reenactment of Nicole Laube's crime that only the perpetrator would know. This led to a guilty verdict on all counts in 2017. The jury was tasked with deciding Tinoco's sentence, choosing between life without parole or life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, they found insufficient mitigating circumstances to warrant the option of parole, resulting in a sentence of life without parole. Before the official sentencing, Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson allowed Tinoco to speak. With his attorneys by his side, Tinoco apologized and asked for forgiveness. Chris Laube, Nicole's husband, recalled that Tinoco's family approached them after the sentencing to offer condolences and apologize. However, in 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Tinoco's conviction, citing changes in juvenile laws. At the time of the crime, Tinoco was automatically referred to adult court due to the nature of the offense. New reforms now allow for offenders between 15 and 17 years old to be tried in juvenile court, rather than being automatically referred to adult court. A new law requires prosecutors to request a hearing to decide if a juvenile's serious crime case should be moved to adult court. This change affects the overturned conviction of Tinoco in the Nicole Laube case. Although Tinoco remains in prison, his defense may try to reduce his sentence if he's retried and reconvicted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologist deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katarina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katarina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katarina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Katarina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katarina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katarina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katarina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katarina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katarina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katarina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katarina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katarina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Bauman made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katerina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katerina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katerina hit her, Ludmila choked Katerina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katerina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Bauman. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Diane Holik. Diane Tammy Holik was born in 1958 in New York City and was known to her friends and family as a hardworking and joyful person. Her work ethic led to financial stability and her successful career. For over 20 years, she worked at IBM, a leading global technology company. In 1996, she relocated to Austin, Texas, where she held a senior position that allowed her to work remotely from her home office. Diane purchased a luxurious home in the suburbs of Austin and lived a privileged life, often hosting wine tastings, dining at upscale restaurants, and frequenting dance clubs. She was also involved in charity work and made efforts to improve her personal life. However, her life took a turn in mid-November 2001 when a severe storm warning was issued for Texas, bringing heavy rain and tornadoes to the Austin area. As a result, Diane worked from home on the morning of November 16th, but suddenly became unresponsive during a scheduled work call. Diane had multiple phones, but she wasn't answering any of them. Her co-workers left messages asking her to call back, but when she didn't respond, they grew concerned. They contacted the police department and requested that someone check on Diane at her home. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor offered a spare key, allowing the police to enter the house. Inside, they found an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As the police searched the house, they found Diane's body in the bedroom on the second floor. The detectives were called to the scene, and they were struck by the unusual cleanliness of the crime scene. There were no signs of theft, struggle, or forced entry. Diane's body was fully dressed and lying next to her bed. The detectives quickly realized that they were dealing with a crime. The investigation revealed distinct strangulation marks on Diane's neck, likely caused by a rope or similar object. Her wrists also showed signs of being bound with cable ties. The cleanliness of the house, the lack of stolen valuables, and the absence of forced entry led the detectives to believe that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. They suspected that the killer was someone she had let into her home voluntarily. An investigation into Diane's death revealed no signs of forced intimacy, but detectives did find suspicious dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance. A towel on the back of the sofa in the living room caught their attention due to its mismatch with the otherwise clean and orderly surroundings, prompting them to send it to the laboratory for examination. Diane's acquaintances reported that she had no known enemies, and the police discovered that she was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, a man she had plans to spend her life with. Diane had been married before, but that marriage ended quickly. She met Dennis through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance, Diane and Dennis formed a close bond, with Dennis proposing to her after 2 months with a valuable platinum ring. However, according to Diane's friends, the relationship began to decline recently. Diane had been feeling controlled by Dennis at times. Diane was also troubled by the decision to relocate to Houston, which meant leaving her home in the suburbs of Austin. She put her house up for sale, but realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the asking price of $435,000. This led detectives to suspect that Dennis might be involved in Diane's death, prompting them to invite him to the police station for a conversation. Dennis agreed to speak with them without a lawyer. The medical examiner determined that Diane died sometime between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. Notably, the wedding ring Dennis had given her was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry remained untouched in the bedroom. This raised questions about the killer's motives and whether the ring was removed to mislead investigators. During the police interview, Dennis appeared to be a grieving man. He was asked about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. Dennis claimed he was in Houston at the time. He stated that he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th and spent the rest of the day at work without contacting her again. When he couldn't reach Diane the next morning, he left a message on her voicemail. The police took Dennis' fingerprints and DNA sample, but ultimately cleared him as a suspect after verifying his alibi. He had not left the city, so the detectives had to expand their search for a new lead. Further inquiry revealed that an unknown man had inspected Diane's house a few days before her death, claiming to be a potential buyer. He had planned to return with his wife to make a joint purchase decision. This clue became a top priority for the police, who began questioning the owners of properties for sale in the area, hoping that someone may have seen this mysterious buyer. Several women in the area reported that a suspicious man had visited their homes around the time of Diane's murder. He, described as being 35 to 45 years old with a large nose and dark hair, had arrived unaccompanied by a real estate agent. 6 of the women refused to let him in, but one allowed him to enter and view her home. She who let him in reported that he acted strangely, showing no interest in the layout of the house or its features. Instead, he specifically asked to see the bedroom on the 2nd floor. When she became uncomfortable and asked him to leave, he introduced himself as Walter Miller. The police searched their databases for anyone matching the name Walter Miller, but the individuals they found did not match his age or appearance. A forensic artist created a sketch of the suspect based on the women's descriptions. Diane's killer removed the cable ties that had bound her hands, but the rationale behind this action is unclear. Did he know his victim personally? A subsequent autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy or assault, yet the police remained vigilant, returning to the crime scene to search for potential traces of semen. However, these efforts yielded nothing. A police sketch of a potential suspect in the Diane Holick case was broadcast on the evening news, urging anyone who recognized the person to come forward. One of the few leads investigators had was a towel from Diane's house with a few short hairs on it. But the hairs were rootless, making it impossible to obtain a complete DNA sample. A woman contacted the police after seeing the sketch and reported a similar encounter. She and her husband had put their house up for sale 6 months prior, and a man had come to visit, claiming he wanted to buy the house for cash and needed to see it first. However, she refused to let him in, and he left. 2 months later, the same man returned to her doorstep and introduced himself as Jim Taylor. She was home alone with her young daughter, as her husband had just left for work. He asked to look around the house, but she denied his request again. This time, he became angry and aggressive, yelling and demanding to be let in. She immediately recalled the encounter and remembered writing down his name and the license plate number of his minivan. The police now had a crucial lead to investigate. A search of the vehicle's registration revealed that the owner was not Jim Taylor, but Patrick Anthony Russo. Initially, Russo seemed like an unlikely suspect. He was a married man with 2 children, lived 40 minutes outside of Austin, and was a member of a church music band. However, a deeper look into his past revealed a disturbing history of violent crimes against women. Russo had been convicted of a series of attacks, including one that involved abducting and attempting to strangle a victim with cable ties. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison but was released on parole after serving only 8 years. While in prison, he met his future wife, Janet, a church volunteer. The police found it hard to believe that Russo's connection to the case was mere coincidence. The police visited Anthony Russo's house with a search warrant, and he seemed unsurprised by their arrival. Although they found no evidence of Diane's belongings, including her ring, in his house or minivan, a neighbor reported seeing a similar vehicle at Diane's house on the day she died. In the utility room, investigators discovered cable ties identical to those that left marks on Diane's wrists. However, these ties are widely available at hardware stores. The police asked Anthony to come to the station for further questioning, where they inquired about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Anthony claimed that on the 15th, he drove to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Notably, the radio station was near Diane's house. He stated that he left the station around 4 p.m. but got lost due to a hurricane, arriving home around 6 p.m. This alibi is questionable, as the forensic medical expert reported that Diane died between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Russo was questioned by the police about whether he was looking to buy a house. He claimed he had not inquired about any properties for buy, which would later prove to be an important statement. When shown a photo of Diane, Russo remained impassive and denied having met her. With no evidence connecting him to the crime, the police had no choice but to release him. However, when detectives investigated further by visiting a radio station Russo had mentioned, they discovered that his previous statement was a fabrication. The employees at a local business explained that they didn't lock the doors during a tornado warning because a large crowd had gathered in the lobby. Meanwhile, a woman who was selling her house contacted the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect in a recent crime. She had been at home with her child when he came to her door, claiming to be interested in buying a house. He was holding a pamphlet with real estate listings, including her own home. She allowed him into her home, but when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her. However, he quickly fled when he heard her child crying in the next room. She retained the pamphlet, which was later given to the police. They found a clear fingerprint on the pamphlet, which belonged to Anthony Russo. Russo denied ever looking at houses for sale, but the fingerprint proved he had lied to the police. Russo's false statement was a misdemeanor, and since he was still on probation, it was a violation of his parole conditions. The police arrested him, fearing that he might flee while they searched for evidence linking him to the death of Diane. To ensure public safety, the authorities decided to keep Russo in custody. The police were able to locate 15 women who had showed homes to a man who matched Anthony Russo's description. All 15 women were asked to identify the suspect from a lineup of 5 men who were similarly dressed and had similar appearances. However, only 10 of the women were able to positively identify Russo as he who had visited them to view homes. The remaining 5 women were unable to make an identification. Despite this, the police still had reason to believe Russo was involved in the crime and brought him in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Russo continued to deny any involvement in the crime, but eventually stopped answering questions and requested to see his wife. Meanwhile, the police received the results of a DNA analysis from the laboratory. The results showed that a hair found on a towel at the victim's home matched Russo's DNA profile. While this was a significant piece of evidence, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance that the hair could have belonged to someone else with the same DNA profile. Despite the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, the police still lacked a direct link between Russo and the victim's death. Investigation revealed 2 key pieces of evidence that implicated in Diane's death. Firstly, cell phone data placed Russo in the same area as Diane on the day she died. Secondly, a thorough examination of Russo's home computer uncovered a disturbing search history. Russo frequently visited an adult website where he consumed content explicitly depicting strangulation during intimate activities. Furthermore, the website required subscription, indicating that Russo actively sought out this material and was willing to pay for it. 2 days prior to Diane's death, Russo had accessed a particular story on the website that told the tale of a man who, under the guise of being a buyer, infiltrated a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables to make the crime appear as a robbery, thus disguising his true motive of satiating his desire for strangulation. Detectives delved into Russo's financial life and found he and his wife had a mere $2,000 in savings and were still making mortgage payments on their current home, clearly indicating he was in no position to buy a new house. Without concrete evidence, police arrested Russo and charged him with the murder of Diane Hollick nearly 2.5 years after her death, which took place on November 15, 2001. In court, 14 women testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about viewing homes, often visiting them in person on the day of the murder. Notably, these women all matched a specific profile, suggesting Russo had been observing them beforehand. While most refused him entry, one woman allowed him in initially but soon asked him to leave due to his strange demeanor. Russo's interest in homes was not random, as he specifically sought out homes occupied by women of a particular age group. The prosecution presented evidence that Russo visited homes for sale, often targeting women who lived alone. Russo visited Diane's house again, likely at her invitation, but this time with a specific intention. He had planned his actions carefully to avoid leaving any evidence. On a rainy day, Diane offered him a towel to dry off, which he casually discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him around the house, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed that Russo derived pleasure from the act of strangulation, which ultimately led to Diane's death. Before leaving the scene, Russo took cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which were never found by the police. He used a spare key hidden at the front door to lock up behind him. This was the prosecution's version of events. At the trial, Russo's current and former wives testified that he had a history of enjoying the act of strangulation. It's worth noting that Russo had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, but never admitted to his guilt, despite his history of similar crimes. Rousseau will become eligible for parole again and can submit his initial petition in 2044. At that point, he will be approximately 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Anglin. Michelle Anglin was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California. Later, her family moved to Arizona, where she was raised by her mother, Peggy, and stepfather, Larry McCall. Michelle had two older sisters, Cindy and Christina. When Michelle was around 20 years old, she started dating Hudson England, and their relationship blossomed. They made each other happy, and when Hudson proposed, Michelle accepted without hesitation. In late 1995, they got married in a joyous ceremony surrounded by their families and friends. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, was also a realtor. According to Michelle's mother, it was she who inspired Michelle to enter the real estate industry. Michelle's family would regularly keep in touch with her via her work phone when she was in the office. When showing houses to clients, Michelle always carried a pager, allowing her loved ones to reach her if needed. However, on February 9, 1996, Michelle did not respond to calls and messages from her family. She would usually inform someone about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. The job of a realtor can be fraught with risk, often exceeding that of other professions. This is due in part to the nature of their work, which often involves working alone and visiting isolated locations to show properties. Predators often target realtors, luring them to empty homes with false intentions, such as feigning interest in buying a house. Once the realtor is alone and vulnerable, the predator can take advantage of the situation. Concern for this inherent danger led Michelle's family to become worried when they couldn't contact her during the day. Michelle's sister Cindy sought assistance from her boyfriend, a member of the Phoenix Police, who offered to perform a welfare check on Michelle. When he visited her workplace, he discovered Michelle's parked car, which seemed undisturbed. When Cindy's boyfriend entered the office, he found the lights on and music playing. However, a closer look revealed that Michelle's personal belongings, including her purse and pager, were still on a table in the unlocked office. This raised questions about why she had left in such a hurry, abandoning her belongings behind. That evening, Michelle's family filed a missing persons report with the police. Earlier that day, Michelle had an appointment with a potential buyer to show them 3 houses near her office. Since the houses were close to her office, she decided not to use her car. When the police arrived, they inspected Michelle's office and then visited the 3 houses she might have shown the buyer. During their initial search, they found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor of one of the houses. They also noticed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, one into each sink, but everything else seemed undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend asked her about Michelle's outfit, as police found buttons they suspected belonged to her. Cindy couldn't recall. A search of the houses, especially where the buttons were found, led to a tragic discovery that Michelle's body under the master bed. Investigation revealed seminal fluid, broken candlesticks, Michelle's clothes, and paint and plaster chips under the bed and in the bathroom. The forensic examination found no evidence of forced intimate contact before Michelle's death. However, it suggested the perpetrator intended to do so, undressing Michelle despite her resistance. Bruises on her neck indicated she was strangled while fighting back. The violent confrontation occurred in the master closet and bath, as shown by scattered buttons, seminal fluid, damaged candles, and broken ceramic chips. During the attack, Michelle's clothing was torn off, as evident by her tattered and interwoven clothes. Her body showed multiple signs of the intense struggle, numerous bruises and abrasions on her body, defensive wounds on her hands and wrists. Michelle's desperate fight to defend herself against her assailant ultimately proved futile. After her daughter's death, Peggy spoke out about the safety concerns facing women who work alone, including real estate agents in model homes and open houses. As a result of her vocal advocacy, Peggy claims to have been fired from her job. The police's first lead in the investigation was Michelle's husband, Hudson England. It's standard procedure for law enforcement to initially investigate family members to determine if they were involved in the crime. Michelle's family, however, did not suspect Hudson, as they were a happy couple who had married just 4 months prior to her death. Nevertheless, the investigators decided to look into Hudson's alibi. When questioned by the police, Hudson appeared genuinely distraught over Michelle's death. He claimed to have spent the day visiting several car dealerships in search of a family vehicle, as they were planning to start a family. The police verified his alibi and found it to be true, ultimately ruling him out as a suspect. During the investigation, he stated that he had no idea who would want to harm Michelle and speculated that she was likely attacked by someone she was showing a house to. To further investigate, the police reviewed Michelle's phone records and discovered that on February 9th, between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m., she was on a call with a fellow sales agent. Michelle abruptly ended the call, stating that a potential buyer had arrived at the subdivision. The fellow agent attempted to call Michelle back between 4:30 and 5 p.m., but the calls went unanswered. This information allowed detectives to narrow down the time frame of the attack, but they still needed to identify the person Michelle was supposed to meet. Unfortunately, Michelle had not mentioned the potential buyer's name during the phone conversation, nor had she written it in her work notes, leaving the police without any immediate leads on the identity of the mysterious individual. The police investigation into the attack on Michelle involved interviewing people who lived in the area where the incident occurred. One resident, who happened to be returning home from work between 4 o'clock and 4:45 p.m. on February 9th, reported seeing a white man coming down the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale in the neighborhood. This witness also noticed a black, full-sized, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked in the lot of the house. Additionally, several potential buyers who visited the subdivision that day between 4 o'clock and 4:30 p.m. reported seeing a man walking from the direction of the second and third model homes. They also observed that candlesticks in the master bathroom of the third model home had been knocked over into the sinks. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate from a nearby subdivision, contacted the police after hearing the news. She reported that on February 9th, the same day Michelle's body was found at around 2 p.m., she had met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. Kim found it suspicious that he was interested in a $500,000 house, but drove a vehicle that suggested a more modest lifestyle. When Kim accompanied he to a 2-story house, supposedly to answer his questions, she became uneasy. He stood too close to her and casually touched her hand several times, making her wary. After spending only a brief time with him, Kim returned to the sales office, feeling that his questions about the house, such as the type of flooring and the possibility of adding a 4th bedroom, seemed unnecessary and even foolish. Ms. Ramos played a crucial role in the investigation by asking the suspicious client to fill out a guest registration card, which he reluctantly completed. The client, who claimed to be James Adams, provided his real home address and phone number. When police visited the address, they spotted a black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked outside. The truck was registered to 32-year-old James Van Adams, who was not at home at the time. Police took photos of the truck and showed them to Kim, who confirmed that it was the same vehicle driven by the suspicious client she had met just hours before Michelle's death. Further investigation into James Van Adams' background revealed that Adams was a 32-year-old man who was currently separated from his wife and had a child. He had a prior conviction in California for a crime committed in 1990. In that case, Adams had targeted Melissa Cunningham, a petite sales agent who was working alone at an apartment complex. He had asked her to show him model homes that were still under construction, specifically expressing interest in a two-story home with a master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. This event further increased suspicions about Adams. Investigating Michelle England's death led detectives to quickly uncover a previous failed attack by James Adams. They obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. However, Adams refused to cooperate, appeared nervous, and had noticeable injuries on his face, including under his eye. The detectives suspected that these injuries might have been sustained when Michelle defended herself with the missing candlesticks, which were later found. As a result, they collected DNA, blood, and hair samples from Adams. A witness, Kim Ramos, identified him and reported that he had no visible injuries on his face during their meeting. Adams claimed his injuries came from working on his pickup truck, but work records showed he left early on February 9 and didn't return, citing car troubles. When seen next, he had a new facial injury and black eye, which his employer and coworker said weren't there before. The police analysis of Adams' DNA, blood, and hair samples is detailed in court documents, which also reference a sample of seminal fluid found on the carpet in the closet. The Phoenix Crime Lab and DPS Lab conducted DNA testing on a carpet sample. Initially, results excluded James Van Adams, but retesting by the crime lab and further testing included him as a contributor. Despite the police taking extensive fingerprint and footprint evidence from the model home, none of the prints matched Adams. Adams was charged with the murder of Michelle England and denied any involvement in the crime. His trial began on July 1, 1997. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence that they claimed linked Adams to Michelle's death. One key witness was Kim Ramos, who believed she had narrowly escaped being attacked by Adams herself. Ramos testified that Adams had shown suspicious behavior, including wearing casual clothing, driving an old vehicle, and asking unusual questions about the house's flooring and fourth bedroom. Prosecutors also presented evidence of Adams' interactions with other sales agents in California and Briarwood, which they claimed showed a pattern of suspicious behavior. Susan Wright, an employee, met with Adams multiple times. Their first meeting was in September or October 1995, when Adams asked Wright to show him a house. Wright recalled Adams standing too close and not asking questions about the house. On November 5, 1995, James Van Adams visited Susan's office again, signing in as Jim Adams. This was not an incident, as Adams had repeatedly visited her office and called her, asking her out on dates. A pattern of behavior emerged, revealing Adams' deliberate plan of action. Adams targeted women with similar characteristics, attacking them in California in 1990. Victims Michelle, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham worked alone in shared physical traits. Attacks occurred in the afternoon, with Adams often asking victims to accompany him upstairs in a two-story house. He used a similar method, putting his right arm around their necks, ripping off their clothes, and attempting to assault them. The trial was a challenging experience for Michelle's family, who were present throughout the proceedings. The judge had to invite Michelle's mother to go out from the courtroom because she was overcome with emotion and yelled at Adams. However, Adams appeared to take pleasure in the family's distress, occasionally flashing a grin. Nevertheless, his demeanor changed when the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts on July 14, 1997, and he was subsequently sentenced to death. Following the sentencing, Adams launched a series of appeals, claiming he was innocent. In his appeal, he argued that a previous incident in California in 1990, in which Melissa Cunningham escaped, supported his claim that he did not intentionally try to kill Michelle. Adams alleged that during the California attack, he had simply restrained his victim by the neck in an attempt to make intimate contact. He insisted that this incident demonstrated that he did not plan to kill Michelle, and the jury should have considered this when reaching their verdict. James Van Adams' attempts to appeal his death sentence were denied, and on March 14, 2005, he took his own life while in prison. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was asphyxia, consistent with suicide. The news of his death brought relief to the family of Michelle. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30th, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Doni Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Doni Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Doni Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Judy Blake Morlanen. Judy Blake was born on October 16, 1957, in Hancock, Michigan, into a conservative family. As the only daughter, Judy was loved dearly by her parents and 2 older brothers. Her parents, Dale and Mary Ann, were active members of the Redeemer Free Lutheran Church and also ran a successful business called Dale Service. Through this, they provided Judy with a comfortable life in a warm environment. In 1974, Judy met Bruce Morlanen. Both worked in the healthcare industry, with Judy as a nurse and Bruce as a support worker. The age difference was only 3 years, yet the two were complete opposites. While Judy was shy and gentle, Bruce was outgoing and confident. Judy's family was a little apprehensive about Bruce, but love helped Judy and Bruce convince their families, and they got married in 1978. In the following years, Judy's family tried to accept and make Bruce an integral part of her life. It seemed to work because Bruce got along well with Judy's family. Another happy turning point came in 1989 when Judy gave birth to their daughter, Elise. However, the joy and peace in their family life were short-lived. On November 29, 1992, after Thanksgiving, Judy and Bruce visited Judy's family and brought Elise with them. It was also the last day of hunting season in the Upper Peninsula. Bruce and Judy's brothers went into the nearby woods to hunt deer on Sunday morning, while Judy stayed at home with her mother and Elise. Judy took her Springer Spaniel and her parents' dog, Streak, for a walk in the woods behind the Blake home on Highway 38 in Ontonagon County, Michigan. When Judy's mother, Mary Ann, said goodbye to her daughter, she had no idea it would be the last time she would see her. 2.5 hours passed without Judy, and Mary Ann became worried. Although Judy was familiar with the woods, the possibility of an accident or trouble was concerning, especially since hunting was still ongoing. A neighbor joined Mary Ann in searching for Judy. As it grew dark, the 2 women had difficulty following Judy's footprints along the trail. After nearly an hour of searching, Mary Ann came across a terrifying sight. On one of the trails in the woods, Mary Ann saw Judy lying motionless. The dogs were still circling the area. When they tried to turn Judy over, they found a terrible wound and bleeding in her chest, indicating that Judy was no longer alive. When Mary Ann discovered Judy's death, she ran home and reported the incident to the local authorities. Investigators soon determined that Judy had died from a gunshot wound. Although the night was getting colder, the police decided to search the woods with flashlights in hand. However, after searching the entire area, they still did not find many clues, including the bullet that killed Judy. However, they did find one important trace, a burn mark on a maple tree. Detective Bob Ball, who was in charge of the case, believed that the burn mark could have been caused by the bullet that killed Judy. He hoped that if the bullet was found, it would shed some light on the case. Forensic tests later confirmed that the burn mark was indeed caused by a bullet. Based on the position of the body in the burn marks, investigators concluded that the bullet struck Judy first, passed through her heart, exited her body through her left side, hit a tree, and eventually landed somewhere in the woods. Initially, the incident was ruled a tragic accident. Investigators believed that a stray bullet from an unknown hunter killed Judy, which was not unusual in the area. However, determining who was responsible for Judy's death was a difficult task, as bullets from high-powered rifles can often travel 3 miles or more. Most of the time, hunters don't realize that their bullets have killed a person. While Judy's body is being taken to the medical examiner's office, the detectives begin interviewing family members. Everyone seems deeply saddened by the tragedy, but an unusual statement from Bruce makes Detective Bob uncomfortable. Bruce criticizes Judy for not being more careful. Bruce becomes a suspect because, in most brutal cases, the person closest to the victim is usually the suspect. However, Detective Bob also knows that Bruce may just be a husband trying to hide his grief. Bruce's brothers claim that Bruce was with them all day, and they are certain that he had nothing to do with Judy's death. They are even unhappy with the police for considering Bruce a suspect. After 2 days, the autopsy report reveals an important detail about the time of death, estimating it at around 3 p.m. When Detective Bob returns to interview Judy's family again with this new information, Bruce's relatives reveal that although Bruce was with them for most of the day, they did not see him at a particular time. Judy's family, however, remains completely convinced of his innocence. They believe the investigation is flawed in accusing a man who is still grieving the loss of his wife. However, they do not know that the detectives have their own reasons for believing that Judy's death was not an accident. By analyzing the trajectory of the bullet and forensic evidence, investigators find that the bullet entered the body at an upward angle. This is a significant finding because if Judy had been shot by a hunter, the bullet would have entered the body at a downward angle. This raises the suspicion that Judy's death was a targeted murder. However, one question remains: was the killer really Bruce? To verify their suspicions, the detectives decide to summon Bruce for a thorough investigation. On December 11, 1992, just 12 days after the investigation began, Bruce is invited to the sheriff's office for a formal interview. After a brief interview with Detective Bob, Bruce recounts in detail where he had been on the day his wife died and provides the names of nearly 30 people who witnessed his presence that day. However, there is a suspicious 30-minute gap in Bruce's itinerary on the day of the incident that he cannot explain. Despite his repeated claims of having nothing to do with his wife's death, this gap causes Detective Bob to begin questioning what Bruce might be hiding. The truth about Bruce's guilt remains unclear, but his behavior raises suspicions. After his wife's death, Bruce does not spend much time on the funeral. Over the following weeks, he goes skiing, hangs out with friends, and even flirts with some of his deceased wife's friends instead of taking care of his daughter. This causes Judy's family to begin suspecting Bruce, although they initially supported him. Bruce's behavior is the cause of this suspicion. The police are actively investigating the case but have not yet found any concrete evidence against him. To gain information, Detective Bob asks some of Bruce's friends and colleagues to secretly follow him and report back to the police if they see anything suspicious. This method of surveillance reveals an important detail. One of the people asked to follow Bruce is Gail, a 35-year-old colleague. She has a remarkable story to tell the detectives about Bruce. Shortly after the funeral, Bruce shows up uninvited at Gail's house, carrying 5 boxes filled with his deceased wife's belongings. After placing the boxes on Gail's porch, Bruce left before Gail could ask for more information. Since it was the holidays, Gail left the boxes outside for a while without paying attention to them. When she opened the boxes, she discovered that most of them were filled with Judy's clothes. But in one of the boxes, under the pile of clothes, Gail found a letter written 6 months earlier and signed by Judy. Finding this letter was a surprise to Gail, as she had only met Judy once. What was even stranger was the content of the letter. The letter began with Judy's request that Gail keep her old clothes as a souvenir, as she believed that Gail was the only person Bruce trusted. The letter then went into many intimate details about Bruce and Judy's marriage, about why they were no longer compatible and were on the verge of divorce. The letter even mentioned that Bruce needed a new girlfriend. The strangest thing about the letter was that the writer ended by praising Bruce's ability in bed. The letter immediately made Gail feel that something was wrong. The detectives felt the same way. To verify the authenticity of the letter, they showed it to forensic examiner James Stegall. He was tasked with comparing the letter to a sample of Judy's handwriting to see if it was really written by Judy. Handwriting analysis revealed that the handwriting in the letter indicated the speed of the writer, appearing slow and deliberate, which could be a sign of forgery. Judy was ruled out as the author of the letter, but it was also impossible to definitively confirm that the handwriting was Bruce's. With no conclusive evidence against Bruce, the detectives had to rely on limited resources to find more information. Detective Bob decided to continue interviewing Gail. Gail revealed that Bruce had been trying to get her attention for a long time, even before Judy's death. However, Gail, who is happily married, only sees Bruce as a nuisance. Bruce constantly flirts, but Gail deliberately ignores him and hopes he will give up. Gail is not the only one who dislikes Bruce. No one has a good word to say about him. At work, he often flirts with other female employees, causing everyone to try to stay away. His colleagues complain that he is difficult to work with. Gail also reveals that after his wife passed away, he bragged about being rich. According to Gail, this was just his attempt to seduce her. This information makes Detective Bob interested in investigating Bruce's marriage. They speculate that Bruce and Judy often quarrel because of Bruce's habit of flirting at work, but it is uncertain whether Judy is aware of Bruce's behavior towards female colleagues at work. However, the detective also discovered that Bruce and Judy's financial problems, caused primarily by Bruce's irresponsibility in overspending, had occurred in the months leading up to Judy's death. Bruce was deeply in debt, and the situation had become so serious that he was forced to borrow money from one place to pay off another. Judy had always managed her finances well throughout the marriage with her income, but she eventually began to resent Bruce, especially when she was given the added responsibility of caring for their daughter. The detectives discovered that a few weeks before Judy's death, Bruce had begun taking out multiple insurance policies in Judy's name, some of which had a double payout clause if Judy died in an accident. Detective Bob wondered if Bruce saw this as an opportunity to solve his financial problems and get out of the marriage with Judy. In fact, after Judy's death, Bruce was due to receive $330,000 from her insurance policies. What made investigators shudder was that in 1991, nearly 14 months before Judy's death, she had suffered a horrific accident. An 85-pound chimney block accidentally fell from the roof where Bruce was working, hitting Judy in the head and nearly killing her. Fortunately, she survived the attack, although she suffered a severe concussion and was hospitalized for several days. In another shocking development, a fire broke out in her house while Judy was sleeping alone. Fortunately, Judy woke up in time, called the fire department, and escaped once again. After these two incidents, Judy was very frightened. Some of Judy's friends told detectives that she had expressed her intention to leave her husband. Although she had a premonition that something was wrong, she stayed for the sake of her daughter. Judy's family was unaware of her feelings. At this point, Detective Bob Ball was almost certain that Bruce had killed his wife and deliberately staged it as a hunting accident, but he lacked physical evidence. He contacted Dan Castle, a metal detector expert who had helped the police many times before. Knowing that the fatal bullet might still be somewhere in the woods, Detective Bob asked Dan Castle to find it. Dan worked with his metal detector every day, but after searching for weeks without finding anything, he had a problem. The snow had covered up all traces of the bullet. Despite the setback, Dan was not ready to give up. He decided to experiment by using a slingshot to recreate the trajectory of the bullet and determine where it might have landed. Luckily, the idea worked. When he searched the area where his marble ricocheted in the snow, he found the bullet about 80 feet from a maple tree. The discovery of the bullet was important, but authorities needed to determine whether it was the bullet that killed Judy or just another bullet fired during hunting season. Ray Kenny, a firearms examiner from the Marquette State Police Crime Lab, was assigned to analyze the bullet. A few days later, he discovered some important details. It was a .30 caliber bullet from a Moss rifle, and it contained wood fibers. Kenny determined that this was the bullet that had hit the tree, but there was more evidence stuck inside. Kenny found a small pink fiber from Judy's shirt and some black fibers from her jacket. Finally, a crucial link was discovered, creating a major breakthrough in the case. Investigators then focused on Bruce's gun collection. They examined all the rifles that could have fired the bullet collected from the scene and identified 4 weapons that could have been involved. Bruce was forced to tell the truth, but he still chose to lie and denied owning any of the rifles. However, his luck ran out when Judy and Bruce's financial records showed a loan document that listed his gun collection as collateral. Detectives also found an asset list that included a gun that Bruce had not declared. It was a rifle with a scope, matching one of the 4 guns that could have fired the bullet. In the end, investigators concluded that the gun was probably the murder weapon. On April 23, 1993, after 5 months of investigation, Bruce agreed to take a polygraph test after many delays and evasions. During the first part of the test, Bruce calmly answered the investigators' questions. However, when the detectives placed Gale's letter in front of him, the interview took a critical turn. For the first time, Bruce changed his story and confessed to killing his wife after months of denial, perhaps because he realized Gale had cooperated with the police or feared that the authorities were finally closing in on him. With tears in his eyes, Bruce revealed that on November 29, 1992, he saw an opportunity to kill his wife. However, he said that the first 2 times he saw Judy from a distance, he aimed but could not shoot. The third time, he closed his eyes, pulled the trigger, and Judy was fatally shot. Bruce explained that his motive for killing Judy was her threat to divorce him, which he did not want to happen. He claimed that Judy was a strict wife both at work and at home, and was not good at cooking. Bruce said that he threw the rifle into a nearby river, but the police could not find it after searching the water. He also pointed out an error in the medical examiner's report. Although the report said Judy was shot on the left side of the chest, Bruce insisted that she was actually shot on the right side and the bullet exited the left side. This detail was crucial to his confession, as only the killer would know this. Bruce was immediately arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Surprisingly, despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty, claiming that the police had coerced him into confessing. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Bruce, prosecutors decided to seek more evidence in preparation for the trial. Investigators reenacted the moving of the chimney, which Bruce had previously said he had accidentally pushed with his foot. However, they discovered that the chimney was too heavy to have been moved accidentally and required a deliberate act to make it fall. With dozens of witnesses and a wealth of evidence, the trial swung in favor of the prosecution. During this time, Bruce barely moved but burst into tears when Gale took the stand to testify. The defense, on the other hand, had no witnesses to testify. Bruce's attorney, Thomas Castleman, said all of their witnesses refused to appear out of fear. He called the investigation a witch hunt and accused the police of improperly obtaining confessions. As expected, the jury did not believe Bruce's story, and on December 15, 1993, they returned a guilty verdict. On January 21, 1994, Bruce Moylanen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence brought comfort to Judy's family. After the tragedy, Judy's brother and sister-in-law, David and Yvonne Blake, adopted 5-year-old Elise. Crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sajini. In December 2002, Thurun Jinnaraj and Sajini Krishnan, a newlywed couple, started their life together. Thurun and Sajini's marriage was arranged, but the couple was very happy and were building a life together in their apartment. Thurun, a physical education teacher at a local school and a volleyball coach, his wife, Sajini, worked at a bank. Whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball, he would remind his wife, Sajini, that due to the unsafe burglary situation in the area, Sajini should go to her father's house instead of staying alone in their apartment. Sajini's father lived nearby, so she would go to her father's house whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball. On February 5, 2003, Sajini visited her father's house for the last time. Before leaving, she said that she needed money to fill up her car's gas tank. Sajini's father was surprised and asked if Thurun was taking good care of her. Sajini appeared angry and dismissed her father's concerns, saying, "Dad, there's no such thing." Her short reply made her father feel uncomfortable, thinking that it might just be a minor disagreement between the couple. On February 14, 2003, at 7:30 p.m., Sajini had a phone conversation with her sister that lasted about 15 minutes. 2 hours later, at about 9:30 p.m., Thurun contacted Sajini's father, informing him to come to the hospital immediately because Sajini's condition was critical. Family members rushed to the hospital and found that Sajini had passed away. Thurun was deeply moved and cried loudly. Sajini's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a scarf. When the police arrived at the scene, Thurun reported that their house had been broken into, jewelry and money had been stolen, and belongings had been thrown around. Initially, the police suspected that the thieves might have killed Sajini when she discovered them. Thurun's emotional state was so shocked that he couldn't stop crying. His pain was too great, and as a result, his condition worsened. He was so distraught that he couldn't even attend Sajini's funeral. Due to his deteriorating condition, Thurun was hospitalized, where his family provided him with emotional support. Meanwhile, the police were working to identify potential suspects by compiling a list of known thieves in the area. On February 16, 2003, 2 days after Sajini's death, Thurun's brother contacted the police, informing them that Thurun had escaped from the hospital. The police were shocked to find that Thurun had escaped from the hospital. Initially, they had assumed that Thurun was completely innocent due to his poor condition, so the police did not assign anyone to closely monitor Thurun while he was in the hospital. However, Thurun's sudden disappearance aroused the police's suspicions. Sajini's family began questioning the police, demanding to know why they had let their guard down and allowed Thurun to escape. As the case attracted widespread media attention, the pressure on the police increased. They immediately launched a thorough search for Thurun. Meanwhile, Thurun's family was also brought in for questioning by the police, but they were released after a few days. Thurun lived with Sajini in an apartment, while the rest of his family lived elsewhere. A massive search operation was launched across the city to find Thurun. The police set up roadblocks at several locations. Despite these efforts, Thurun remained undetected. Pressure from Sajini's family on the police led to the announcement of a large reward for anyone providing information on Thurun's whereabouts. However, even this lucrative offer failed to yield any leads. Police searches were ultimately unsuccessful. It was later revealed that Thurun had been mistreating Sajini since their marriage, motivated by his extramarital affair with another woman. The police eventually tracked down the girl Thurun had been involved with. She told them that on February 16, Thurun had called her and asked her to marry him. However, she had already learned about Sajini's death by then. As a result, she rejected Thurun's proposal outright, telling him she couldn't marry someone suspected of murder. After that, Thurun and the girl lost contact. Nearly 6 years passed without any update on Thurun from the police. The police kept a close watch on Thurun's family, thinking that he might contact or return home. However, Thurun did not see or contact his family during this time. The police discovered that exactly 6 years after the incident, Thurun had visited his parents in another state, but only briefly, as his father had passed away just a day later. Although the police expected Thurun to return for his father's funeral, Thurun did not return. In 2016, a new officer joined the department and reviewed the case file, asking for an update. The police informed him of the current situation, that Thurun's father had passed away, his mother was ill and living in Madhya Pradesh, and his brother lived in Ahmedabad, but there was still no information about Thurun's whereabouts. The police conducted another investigation by discreetly monitoring the area around Thurun's mother's house, looking for any young men who might visit her. Unfortunately, no leads were found. The police then decided to question the girl who had a relationship with Thurun. She reported that she had not had any contact with Thurun since the incident. However, some of her friends had recently mentioned to her that they thought they saw someone who looked like Thurun at a mall in Delhi. The police formed a team to investigate this new information and visited the mall in Delhi. They checked the footage from all the surveillance cameras, but could not find any evidence of Thurun. After receiving multiple reports of sightings of Thurun in various states, the police became increasingly convinced that he was still alive. They therefore launched a thorough investigation by analyzing around 4,000 mobile phone numbers linked to Thurun's family and friends, hoping to uncover a vital clue. Although their search did not yield any significant breakthroughs, the police were determined to find Thurun. They kept a close watch on his mother's phone, scrutinizing her calls to identify her contacts. Thurun's mother received a call on her mobile phone from a landline number in Bengaluru, also known as the Silicon Valley of India. The call originated from the customer care service of a Bengaluru-based Oracle company. This made the police wonder about the connection between Thurun's mother and the Oracle company. The police suspected that Thurun, whom they were looking for, might be working at the Oracle office in Bengaluru. A police team traveled from Ahmedabad to Bengaluru to investigate further. On October 22, 2018, police visited the Oracle office and met the HR department, but police did not disclose the real purpose of their visit. Instead, they informed the HR department that police needed a list of all employees for law and order purposes. The HR department cooperated and provided the police with a complete list of all Oracle employees. In order to avoid being detected by Thurun, the police had to be extremely careful in their approach, as they knew that Thurun would likely escape if he realized that the police were following him. The problem was, Thurun's name was not on the list that Oracle had provided to the police. This made them worry that their efforts might be in vain. However, one name on the list stood out: Parvin Batelli. When the police recalled that Thurun's mother often spoke to Parvin and his wife, Nisha, this connection piqued the police's interest, and they decided to gather more information about Parvin and Nisha in the hope of finding clues about Thurun. The police found it suspicious that Parvin and Nisha were not active on social media, as this is a rare phenomenon in today's digital age, when most people actively share their lives on social media. The police learned that Thurun's mother frequently talked to Parvin Batelli. In addition, Parvin and Nisha had 2 children. The police began to suspect that Parvin Batelli could be Thurun. Therefore, the police began to collect evidence against him. One feature of Thurun's finger during his time as a volleyball coach was a broken and slightly bent finger on his ring hand. On October 23, 2 policemen went to Oracle's customer service office in Bangalore to meet Parvin. When one of the policemen shook hands with Parvin, the policeman immediately recognized Thurun because of the familiar broken finger. The policeman said, "Thurun, your game is over." Upon hearing Thurun's name, Parvin's condition worsened. Thurin's mistake began when his cell phone stopped working, leaving him worried about his mother. Thurin used his office landline instead of a number he could safely use to contact his mother. This last mistake led to his arrest. If he had not used his office landline, the police likely would not have found him. Thurin was taken to Ahmedabad by the police, where he confessed to the crime, admitting to killing his wife Sajini Krishnan. Thurin shared the entire story with the police. After the murder, Thurin proposed to a friend, but was rejected. He then moved to Pune, took up a small job, and met Nisha. Thurin tricked Nisha into believing that he was an orphan with no family, after which the two got married. The couple moved to Bangalore in 2009, where Thurin began working for Oracle. After years of investigation and manhunt, Thurin Jinaraj was finally recaptured in 2019. In March 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anupama Gulati. Anupama, who lives with her husband and 2 children, was born and raised in Dehradun, but her parents and brother were often worried because they could not reach her on the phone. Since her family used to call her frequently, this loss of contact worried her family. Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan, decided to call Anupama's husband, Rajesh Gulati, whom she had been married to since 1999, to ask about his sister. However, every time Sujan Pradhan called, Rajesh would say that Anupama was either busy or had gone on a business trip. This went on for about 2 weeks. During this time, Anupama contacted her brother via email, informing him that she was completely fine and very happy with her husband and 2 children. This reassured her family. However, when they continued to be unable to reach Anupama on the phone, her parents asked Sujan Pradhan to go to Dehradun and meet Anupama. On December 12, 2010, when Sujan Pradhan went to Rajesh's house, Rajesh greeted him unfriendly and said that Anupama was elsewhere and he could not meet her right away. On the other hand, Sujan Pradhan tried to break into Rajesh's house, leading to heated arguments between the two. However, Rajesh did not allow Sujan to enter the house. When Sujan asked Rajesh about Anupama, Rajesh did not provide a satisfactory answer. Sujan decided to go to the nearby police station and filed a missing report for his younger sister, Anupama Gulati. In the report, he also said that he was trying to enter the house but was prevented by Rajesh. The police found the case suspicious and went to Rajesh Gulati's house. When Rajesh saw the police with Sujan, Rajesh tried to remain calm. The police asked Rajesh about Anupama, but Rajesh did not answer directly and tried to distract them. However, the police soon discovered Rajesh's cunning and decided to conduct a full search of the house. During the search, the police noticed a closed room. When the room was opened, there was nothing unusual except a large freezer. The police found the presence of a freezer very strange because such appliances are commonly used in large shops and restaurants. The police wondered why Rajesh would buy such a large freezer for his small family, but he just kept quiet. The police decided to open the freezer to investigate and found many small black bags inside. When they opened one bag, they discovered pieces of meat and then took out some more envelopes. The surprise came when they found a human skull in one of these envelopes. Rajesh Gulati then confessed to the police that the pieces were the body of his wife, Anupama. He broke down in tears and narrated the story. After his confession, the police arrested Rajesh and took him to a local court. There, he was remanded in custody for 5 days. During further investigation, the police discovered a surprising piece of information. Rajesh explained that he had met Anupama at Delhi University, where they both studied and got to know each other. They soon developed feelings for each other and started falling in love. Initially, they kept their relationship a secret from their families, but later decided to go public and asked for permission to get married. Both families agreed and they had a grand wedding in 1999. After marriage, Rajesh's career grew rapidly, and he found a job in a large company in the US. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US so that he could work as a software engineer. They were living comfortably now, and they had bought a house, which meant that their finances were stable. However, after a few months, Anupama started feeling lonely because Rajesh often went to work every day and she had to stay home alone. During her boredom, Anupama often contacted a close friend of Rajesh's. Later, Rajesh found out that Anupama had become close friends with a close friend of his. Rajesh felt uncomfortable knowing that Anupama and his friend were talking on the phone frequently. This caused many arguments between them. Rajesh asked Anupama many times to stay away from his friend. But she did not listen. This made the situation worse in their home. However, in 2006, Anupama gave birth to twins, and the birth of a daughter and a son brought happiness and harmony to the family. While living in the US, Rajesh and Anupama enjoyed a fairly comfortable life. However, that was completely disrupted in 2007 and 2008 when the US fell into an economic recession, leaving many unemployed. Rajesh, after trying to keep his job for a while, also fell into unemployment. To sustain the family, Rajesh used his savings, but as the situation could not last forever, the savings eventually ran out. At that time, Rajesh had no choice but to sell his house in the US. After selling the house, Rajesh decided to return to India with his family. However, Anupama continued to keep in touch with Rajesh's friends over the phone, and this caused a major argument that led to a conflict between Rajesh and Anupama. The arguments escalated and the couple took the matter to the family court. The court eventually decided that Rajesh would provide Anupama with 20,000 rupees per month to meet their expenses. Thereafter, Rajesh and Anupama lived together in a rented flat for a few months in a place called Governor. After some struggle, Rajesh got a job in a big company in Kolkata, about 990 miles away from his home. For the sake of his job, Rajesh had to leave his wife and 2 children and start a new life in Kolkata. In Kolkata, around 2009, Rajesh met a married woman who was suffering from an unhappy marriage. Her husband was not good and often abused her. When Rajesh heard the story of this woman, he felt sympathy for her and gradually, the two became close friends. Gradually, their friendship developed into love. After some time, they decided to marry each other secretly at a temple in Kolkata, without informing any of their family or friends. Rajesh returned to his normal routine after his second marriage. He maintained regular contact with his first wife, Anupama, went to work daily, and kept his second marriage a secret from everyone. However, Anupama noticed changes in Rajesh's behavior and suspected that he was involved with another woman in Kolkata. But she was unaware that Rajesh had actually remarried. The couple continued to argue over this issue and their relationship became so strained that Anupama started thinking about divorce. However, Rajesh successfully convinced Anupama and they did not go through with the divorce. But when Rajesh failed to pay Anupama the court-ordered maintenance of 20,000 rupees. These financial disputes finally reached a boiling point on October 17, 2010, when Rajesh and Anupama had a huge argument. Rajesh becomes enraged and violently pushes his wife, Anupama, causing her head to hit the corner of the bed. As a result, she starts bleeding profusely. Initially, Rajesh is shocked, but moments later, he lifts a pillow from the bed and uses it to smother Anupama. However, unbeknownst to Rajesh, Anupama is already deceased. Rajesh then frantically searches for a place to hide his wife's body, aware that his children will soon return home from school. With time of the essence, he moves Anupama's body to the second bathroom in the house and locks the door. As he tries to devise a plan to dispose of the body without arousing suspicion, his children arrive home from school and ask about their mother. Rajesh fabricates a story, telling them that their mother suddenly left for Delhi. Rajesh's children believed their mother, Anupama, had gone to visit their grandparents in Delhi. However, Rajesh had other plans. While the children were in school, he went to the market and purchased several items, including a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. When Rajesh brought these items home, he hid them in a separate room. When the children left for school the next day, Rajesh began the gruesome process of dismembering Anupama's body with an electric saw. He closed all the doors and windows to block out the noise. According to Rajesh's statement, Rajesh cut Anupama's body into 72 pieces. He then placed each piece into black bags and carefully stored the bags in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the deceased from spreading. This process took Rajesh several days to complete. During this time, Rajesh continued to deceive Anupama's parents and brother by making excuses whenever they called, unaware of the horrific events unfolding at his residence. Rajesh took steps to cover up Anupama's disappearance by making excuses to their neighbors and telling their children that their mother had traveled to Delhi. He also had access to Anupama's email account, which allowed him to maintain communication with Sujan Pradhan, Anupama's brother, making it seem as though Anupama was still alive. Following the murder, Rajesh took the children on a weekend trip to Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. During the trip, he would collect 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge containing pieces of Anupama's body and dispose of them in the forests or gorge along the way. This revelation shocked everyone, and the police began searching the areas where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of Anupama's remains. After an extensive search, the police found some black bags containing body parts in the surrounding forests and gorge. Based on this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was arrested and sent to jail. Rajesh Gulati's twin children were sent to Delhi to live with Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan. A court had granted Sujan official custody of the children on March 7, 2011. Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, appealed this decision but was unsuccessful. On November 3, 2012, the court dismissed his appeal and confirmed that Chari would retain custody of the children. Evidence provided by the police revealed the horrific nature of the crime. Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and then cut her body into 72 pieces. After a 7-year trial, Rajesh Gulati was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on September 1, 2017. He was also ordered to pay a fine of 1.5 million rupees. The court ordered that 70,000 rupees of the fine would go to the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of the twin children. The children would have access to this money only after they came of age. Rajesh Gulati was sentenced in a lower court, but he appealed this decision in a higher court in 2018. However, there has been no ruling on his appeal yet, resulting in his prolonged imprisonment. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gabby Doolan. Gabby Doolan was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of just over 4,000. In Scottsville, most people know each other or know someone in every family. Like many small towns, here there are very few types of entertainment. Locals primarily focused on school sports, especially football. The local school had good fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they frequently held games and competitions. Participating in these activities has become a tradition for locals, especially when their children participate. Gabby's family was typical. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was a member of the school football team, while Gabby participated in cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabby was 7 years old, their town was preparing for the biggest football game of the year. Their school team was about to compete against a team from another county. And everyone was excited for this contest. Although Gabby's older brother played on the team, but she liked playing with other children more than playing games. Gabby's parents originally intended to leave her at home with their youngest son, cared for by a relative. However, Gabby convinced them to let her join them. On the evening of November 14th, they went to the school field for a game. In addition to local people, many people from a neighboring county came to support their team. Once they arrived at the stadium, Gabby saw her friends and asked her mom if she could play with them. Her mom agreed but reminded her to stay on school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers, while she ran off to meet her friends. Gabby ran back and forth to her mom a few times. After that, she ran away to play again. At one point, she visited her dad, who was in the announcement room, and asked him for some money to buy snacks at the concession stand, then she running off again. Minutes later, Gabby's friends approached her mom in the bleachers, looking worried. Her mom noticed Gabby was not with them and asked what was wrong. The girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek, and Gabby was to find them. They had hidden in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot to find Gabby, but she was nowhere to be seen. They called her name and checked all the places they had been playing earlier, but Gabby had seemingly disappeared. They then remembered that Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to find her mom, so they rushed there. Gabby's mother panicked when she discovered her daughter was missing and quickly informed her husband. He hurried off to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the concession stand, where Gabby had wanted to buy snacks, to continue her search. While searching, the parents Gabby's encountered friends and shared the news about their daughter's disappearance. Concerned, their friends joined in the search for Gabby. They thoroughly searched the area around the stadium but found no trace of Gabby. Returning to the stadium, the parents Gabby's made an announcement over the loudspeakers in hopes that she would hear it, but there was still no sign of her. As the game paused and spectators returned to their seats, they continued to ask people if they had seen Gabby, and some offered to help search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. They walked through the forest but still couldn't find Gabby. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since she disappeared, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabby's friends, and they began their search. The local police department had little experience with serious cases like this, as child disappearances were rare in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario, that Gabby may have been abducted or harmed. The officers encountered a pressing issue: the suspected kidnapper was likely at the stadium, where a game was about to conclude. Realizing they had limited time before fans started leaving, which may include suspects, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. Police kept watch at all exits to stop anyone from fleeing. They decided not to inform people about the situation, to avoid causing panic, so as not to hinder their search. If people became aware that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl might be nearby, it could lead to chaos. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the surrounding area. They moved toward the baseball field and entered the woods. Deeper into the trees, they discovered a small creek where they found the body of a girl, later identified as Gabby. They called for an ambulance to transport her body to the medical examiner. A preliminary examination indicated asphyxiation due to visible marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of Gabby's clothes were also missing, making the police suspect that she had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and immediately thought that her daughter had been found in need of medical attention. She rushed to the scene, but was stopped by the police, who didn't want her to witness the disturbing scene they were dealing with. The police investigation had quickly turned into a murder case, so they decided to relocate everyone from the stadium to the school gym. The investigators suspected that the killer might be among the group, and they needed to identify the perpetrator as soon as possible. The investigators then informed Gabby's parents about the likely circumstances of her death. They inquired if the parents had any suspicions about the person responsible for this heinous act. Specifically, they inquired if anyone had made threats against the family or if the parents had noticed anything unusual. However, Gabby's parents stated they had no idea who could be behind this act. Then, detectives interviewing Gabby's friends to see if they had noticed anything unusual that evening. They asked if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls didn't remember anything suspicious. Detectives also brought Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to carefully observe the people present, hoping to trigger their memory. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any significant leads. The lead detective persisted in his belief that Gabby's friends may have unknowingly seen the kidnapper. He suspected that they might have been hesitant to point him out due to fear. To aid their recall, he encouraged them to remember every detail from that evening. Eventually, one of Gabby's friends mentioned that when she hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. Although the girl's memory of the man's appearance was limited, she recalled that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the ticket vendor who confirmed seeing a man with a denim jacket draped. The vendor found this person's behavior unusual and suspected he was intoxicated. Although this new information helped, the police still couldn't identify the man. The police started questioning the people who had been at the game. As they did, it became clear why they were all being held there. They grew concerned, particularly for the safety of their children. Despite their fear, they cooperated with the police and answered their questions. To further investigate, the police cross-referenced the names of men present in the gym against a sex offenders registry, but found no matches. They also checked on sex offenders who had lived near the school, verifying their whereabouts at the time of the incident, but all of them had alibis. None of them had been near the school at the time of the incident. Several witnesses reported that they saw a man named Timothy Madden, he acting strangely near the women's restroom during the game. As a local resident, many people were familiar with him, but they stated that his behavior that evening seemed suspicious. According to these witnesses, Madden was wearing a denim jacket, which matches the description provided by one of Gabby's friends who also saw a man near the restroom. A witness who was a distant relative of Timothy reported that during the game, Timothy seemed distracted. Despite his younger son playing on the field, Timothy, who normally showed great interest in his son's sports activities, wasn't paying attention. Several other witnesses also expressed concerns about Timothy's unusual behavior, leading investigators to interrogate him. As night fell, many people had been released from the school. Before speaking with Timothy, investigators sought the local sheriff's opinion. The sheriff, who had known Timothy, doubted he was capable of committing such a crime. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children. When police went to speak with him, they knocked on his door, and he answered. The officers asked if he knew the reason for their visit, and Timothy stated he was aware of Gabby's murder, but had no involvement in it. The detectives then used a tactic to gather more information. They asked Timothy if he could explain why several eyewitnesses claimed to have recorded him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder, through videos they supposedly provided. However, the detectives had fabricated this information. Their intention was to provoke Timothy into revealing his guilt or new information if he was involved in the crime. Timothy initially claimed he had no knowledge of the events, but he quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking to Gabby near the stadium that evening. According to Timothy, he had stepped outside to smoke when several girls ran by him. Shortly after, Gabby approached and asked if he had seen her friends, explaining they were playing hide-and-seek and she couldn't find them. Timothy directed her towards their location, and she ran off. The detectives found Timothy's rapid change in story suspicious. Furthermore, his account indicated that he had spoken to Gabby just minutes before her disappearance. Notably, at the time when they met near the stadium, there were no witnesses present, which could have provided Timothy with an opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives then inquired if Timothy could provide a reasonable explanation if his DNA was found on Gabby's body. He replied calmly that he had none. They also requested a DNA sample from Timothy and the clothing he wore at the stadium. Timothy agreed to both requests. However, when handing over his clothing to the police, they discovered suspicious stains on the pants, denim jacket, and underwear that resembled blood. When questioned about the stains, Timothy insisted they were just dirt and denied any wrongdoing. However, the police were skeptical and decided to wait for the DNA analysis results to proceed with an arrest. After several days, the forensic pathologist completed the examination of the victim's body, confirming that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. The pathologist also determined that she had been brutally assaulted. A biological sample of the perpetrator was extracted and sent to the laboratory for further analysis. The day after the murder, something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, claiming a suspicious person had been seen at the game. The letter provided a detailed description of the person's car, including the make and license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly track down the vehicle's owner, who was a student living about 30 minutes from Scottsville. When questioned by the police, the student denied attending the game and knowing about the murder. He claimed to have been at work that evening, and the police were able to verify his alibi. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. Despite this, the person who wrote the anonymous letter was never identified. It is unclear whether the letter was intended as a trap or a cruel joke, but it is clear that the student was innocent. Police quickly received additional clues. Several people reported suspicious behavior by a 16-year-old local boy. He had given conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the game, claiming both to have been there and not to have attended. He also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. The detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. However, what they found even more alarming was that the boy had threatened his father with a knife just 2 weeks before the murder. The police wanted to question the boy further but needed his parents to be present. However, his mother refused to cooperate and wouldn't provide a DNA sample, leaving the police without any concrete evidence. As news of the police investigation into the Timothy family spread, rumors began circulating in the small town of Scottsville. Some speculated that one of Timothy's older sons could be a suspect, while others suspected Timothy himself. Gabby's parents were shocked to hear these rumors, especially since they had known Timothy Madden since childhood and were close to his family. Their children played on the same sports teams, and they would often sit together at games. Given their long-standing friendship, Gabby's parents found it difficult to imagine that anyone from their social circle could be connected to the murder. Following the spread of rumors in town, another incident occurred. The 20-year-old eldest son of the Timothy family began sending text messages to the police. He using profanity and issuing threats, insisting police stop bothering his family. He then was promptly arrested for making these threats. Further investigation revealed that there was an outstanding arrest warrant for him in another town, related to allegations of assaulting a minor. During questioning, the young man attributed his behavior to frustration over the accusations against his family. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town on the evening in question. He consented to providing a DNA sample, which was then sent to the lab for analysis. On November 20th, 6 days after Gabby's murder, her funeral was held, drawing hundreds of mourners from Scottsville and surrounding towns. Everyone came together to support Gabby's parents, donating to help cover the funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the lab finished analyzing the DNA evidence, comparing it to samples from Timothy and his son. The results were conclusive. The semen on Gabby's body matched Timothy Madden's DNA, and the blood on his clothes matched Gabby's DNA. Detectives attended the funeral and discreetly informed Gabby's parents about this. At the same time, police officers arrived at Timothy's house and took him into custody. However, Timothy still maintains that he is innocent. He said the blood on his clothes was his own, the result of a scratch from a fence. This contradicted his initial testimony to police, in which he had claimed the stain was mud. With the DNA evidence in hand, the prosecution took the case to court, seeking the death penalty. During trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. He raised concerns about the reliability of the evidence, citing inconsistencies in the timeline. Specifically, the lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium filming a game at the time of the murder. However, Timothy himself had previously told police that he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer highlighted that Gabby's body was discovered in a creek, yet when Timothy returned to the stadium, his clothes were dry. Additionally, Timothy's mother, who resided with him, reported that when Timothy came home, he was wearing clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the discovery of Timothy's semen on Gabby's body made all of the defense's arguments meaningless. This evidence firmly established that Timothy was involved in the case. According to police, his account of that evening contained some truth. It is possible that Timothy did leave the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was searching for her friends. Given that Timothy was the father of one of Gabby's friends, she would have been familiar with him. Gabby may have approached Timothy to ask about the whereabouts of the other girls. At this point, Timothy might have concocted a plan, telling Gabby that the girls had gone into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to take her there. Once they were far enough from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then go back to the match. The wait for Timothy's trial had been ongoing for 4 years, causing distress for Gabby's family. They were anxious for justice to be served and for the person responsible for the murder to be held accountable. However, the case was slowed down due to many administrative procedures, leaving the family frustrated and having to wait for many years. In 2019, the prosecution and defense started negotiating a plea deal. The prosecution proposed waiving the death penalty if Timothy pleaded guilty and accepted a life sentence. Gabby's parents supported this proposal, as the prolonged wait for the trial was taking a toll on them. They also wanted to avoid the emotional pain of attending multiple hearings. Although Timothy had consistently maintained his innocence, he eventually agreed to the plea deal and confessed. However, the terms of the agreement did not require him to disclose the details of his actions. He only had to admit his guilt. This was unsatisfactory for Gabby's family, as they wanted the perpetrator to take full responsibility for his crimes and provide a complete account of what happened to their daughter. The court hearing became heated, Gabby's father yelling at Timothy and Timothy's relatives shouting at Gabby's family. The judge was forced to intervene, calling a break and separating the parties. Ultimately, Timothy was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison.